University in Australia, and today me and my co-authors we're going to be talking to you about water. So that's a pretty long title. At the moment, the only thing that I really want to point out to you is the, that's not even in there. We're going to be talking about digital water play. And what do I mean by digital water play? We're talking about any kind of experience where the player is interacting both with water and some kind of digital component. Now that might be a mixed reality experience, but it could also just be someone sitting in their pool playing an Xbox that's on their land. I don't know why you do that, but it is possible. So why are we talking about water? Well, water invokes a lot of emotions within us as human beings. There's excitement, fear, serenity. There's also annoyance when you forget to pack your umbrella when you travel into London. We play a lot with water, especially in Australia during the hot summers. When I was a kid, I was always at a pool, at a beach, running through the sprinklers, playing with water guns. It's one of the fundamental ways, especially as kids, that we play with each other. And this has been the same throughout history. This picture that's shown behind me is from Helgrim Palace in Salzburg. Was built in the 17th century, and it's essentially a Renaissance-style water park. There's water jets under each person's seat, and there's various fountains and ways to squirt people, get people wet, and get everyone laughing, of course, except for the host. The host stays completely dry. Recently, Von Lucas has said that water is an unconventional environment for mixed reality entertainment, meaning that it's not what you expect. The user doesn't have full grasp over their breathing or even limb availability. The way that we move on land is very different to the way we move in water, and that's something that we're going to be focusing on in a moment. Digital water play is fairly unexplored, so out of the 30 references that we put in our paper that deal with kind of any form of HCI and water, 26 out of the 30 of them were since 2009. So that's very recent, and also to consider, unless I've missed it, I haven't seen any presentation at this conference yet that has dealt with water. And that's quite telling. Every game that we're designing, it's either a completely digital experience played while you're sitting on your couch or in a chair, or it's some kind of mixed reality experience, but it's firmly grounded on land and not in this kind of unconventional environment that was stated before. Why is it more approachable now? Why are all these references coming out recently? Well, it's simply a technology gap. So there's always that concern of mixed technology. With water, you get electrocution. Well, you don't have that as much these days because you have sensing devices that can sense from a distance. You have material that's a lot easier to create to insulate your devices and so forth. And the image behind me again is it's from Red Bull. Recently, they created a framework for how they would train their young surfers, and they use an incredible amount of different sensing technology. It's not all in real time, it's not a game, it's more to monitor what their surfers are doing, show it to them, and improve their performance. I recommend you check out the video, it's quite interesting, all the different things that they combine into one framework. So just quickly, this paper and this presentation, there's no implementation here, there's no experimental results. This is more of a taxonomy, a review of the existing literature. Who is it for? It's for game designers, user experience designers, artists, anyone who's looking to combine technology and water in some way. Especially if you're starting off in a project, a lot of the considerations and the design features that we talk about are really going to help you if you kind of look at those before you launch in and kind of see what kind of things am I going to run into when I'm trying to tackle this problem. That's what we're hoping to achieve with this, and of course both academic and industry. The insights are drawn from our own experiences. So two of my co-authors, Floyd and Sarah, worked on the Gravity World project where they're kind of combining robotics and underwater play, as well as underwater performance arts. We're currently working with a theme park operator in Australia who runs water parks and trying to think of how do you innovate in a water park. I don't know about you, but all the water parks I go to, you've got the choice of water slide, or wave pool. So that's, again, technology has completely skipped that aspect of our life now, that aspect of our entertainment. of course, a lot of it's drawn from the literature. So the advice that we give within the paper is either common sense, our own experience from designing and what we've come across, or what we've observed in other people's work. So throughout the paper, we're going to be talking about this kind of taxonomy of 6 degrees of water contact. So you have vicinity, so you're kind of near water, but you're not actually in contact with water. Just to be clear, every time I'm talking about water contact in this paper, it's contact between the player and the water. Whether the technology is at that same level of contact is irrelevant, for the most part. So yeah, your player might be in the vicinity of water. They can still be influenced by water. The sight and sound of water definitely instills emotion within people. Sporadic contact, so in this phase, kind of the water is in motion in some way, it's hitting the player, but they're not fully submerged at any time. So thinking about things like showers and sprinklers, splashes of water. On top of water, here you're still not actually in the water, but you are kind of indirectly in contact with it. If you're floating on a surfboard or floating on a boat or something like that, your sense of balance changes and how you interact with some technology may change. If you're rowing, you may not have your hands free and so forth. Partially submerged, this is a fairly broad category. It may be anywhere from just your ankles are deep in water or your hands are in water, all the way up to your neck being in water. But the defining features of this category are that your feet are firmly planted on solid ground, whether you're in a body of water or not, and that your head is above water. The floating category, so here, your feet are now not touching the ground, you're having to tread water, you're having to swim, your head may sometimes be underwater, may be above water, and then underwater you're now completely submerged, you have to hold your breath for a certain amount of time, and the swimming dynamics are different from when you're floating. So just to give some examples, some of these images are in the paper, and I thank all the authors that allowed us to use their images in the paper. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name because it would just be offensive, I think. I'm that bad with names. So this is in vicinity, so this was a performance project called Desert Rain, I believe, where the kind of an interactive environment was projected onto a water screen, and the sound and the sight of the water really tied into the performance, and it was really meant to convey a specific emotion, a specific sense to the user who was interacting with the performance. Sporadic Contact, this is a fighting game created recently called Water Ball Z, where Kinect detects the motions of one of the players and converts that into a water projectile, into a sprinkler, so you can kind of splash people from a distance as if you're powering up a strong attack. On top of water, this is from the Swim Games project in the Netherlands. This is a pirate raft game where it's a very typical kind of Xbox Kinect game where you're trying to swat things that are on the screen. However, the dynamics completely change when you're standing on a floating medium. Your balance is completely changed. Trying to stay upright on that kind of floating device as is quite hard, let alone playing a game at the same time. Partially submerged, again this is the Gravity Well project by my co-authors Sarah and Floyd. This is where, in this iteration, at least of the project, the robotic devices are kind of just in water tanks. You interact with one of them, and all the other ones kind of mimic the motion of the one that you're interacting with. Floating, this was turning swimming actions into a game, and it's quite an interesting paper and there's a few similar ones like it, of how to detect motion when someone doesn't have any of their limbs available to interact with the device. You really have to start to focus on novel ways of interaction. And finally, underwater, this is an augmented reality system designed to be used while you're swimming. In this case, it's a playful interaction in a swimming pool, but this kind of technology is also quite useful in a working environment for divers who may be repairing things that are underwater. They get an additional view through a virtual reality headset. So with those degrees of water contact established, we created, or discovered 27 design features. We separated those into 4 categories: state, sensing, acting, and networking, at 2 of the separate targets of the player or the computer. And these are the 27 design features. So the state for the player kind of deals with the internal and physical response of the player, their own exhaustion levels, how they're breathing, their mental response to being in or around water. Computer, kind of similar, but for the hardware, how the hardware is reacting in this case, to the hardware being the water. Sensing is about how the player or the computer senses their environment, especially the other target, so how the player senses output from the computer, how the computer senses output from the player. Acting is the reverse of that, so how the player is acting in their environment, especially in how it's communicating with the computer and how the computer is communicating with the player. And then networking is between targets, so how a player is communicating with another player and how a computer is communicating with another computer. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all of these. There is a lot of examples and a lot of kind of ideas within the paper, so if you're curious, please do read or please ask me later on. These figures are also in the paper. They kind of show the effect of water on each one of these design principles or design features at different degrees of water contact. So each one of these degrees of water contact are going to affect the features differently. In some cases, not so much. So in the green, the human's mental response is affected quite a lot through every single degree of water contact, whether you're just seeing and hearing water or whether you're completely submerged in water. Whereas things like taste being not flavour where it's influenced by smell, but taste being the texture and stuff of food. Assume that your mouth is closed, that's a closed environment, the water's not going to affect it that much at all. Similarly, if you're starting a project and you're dealing with the vicinity of water, you're most likely not going to have to consider too many additional things over if you're just designing for land. But if you're designing for underwater environments, everything radically changes, and there's a kind of spectrum in between that. Same thing for the computer design features. So again, in the floating and underwater environments, a lot of things change, and there's a lot of things that you need to start to consider. One thing that I'll leave you guys with as well is the idea of turning constraints into opportunities. So a lot of these features that are in the paper, you initially look at them and you think, this is a design constraint. There's something that's prohibiting me, that's going to change when my player enters the water. Maybe I can't use certain sensing technology with them, or the way that I display information for them is going to change. But that's a problem for engineers. As game designers, that's an opportunity. It's a new way for us to think about how we're going to interact with the player, how we're going to maybe exploit that constraint, or just create novel interactions. And one of our favorites is from the Jellystone game from 2013. So the PlayStation Move controllers interact with Bluetooth. Bluetooth does not work at a very shallow depth of water, so as soon as it goes underwater, you lose communication. And you can actually use that as a way of creating novel gameplay. So in this case, you have to submerge another player's controller underwater, and when you do, that person's kind of out of the game, and then it's a game of tag. You got to be the last person standing. So just to wrap up, there's a lot of opportunities for digital water play and for knowledge growth. The effect of water is different across different degrees of water contact. I encourage you all to, especially with the water environments, view constraints as opportunities. And lastly, this taxonomy is just a first step. So a lot of the ideas in here, like I said, are our opinion and what our observations are. Most likely that you're going to argue with them, you're going to have a different perspective, and that's fantastic. And because there's a limited amount of work, there's a limited understanding. So at the moment, we're kind of considering the player and the computer separately in the water environment. But once there's a bigger corpus of work, we can start to understand how those two things are interacting at the same time within the water environment. So for your next project, try and consider implementing it in a water environment if it suits you.